City Commission meeting of Tuesday, February 6, 2018. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. First item up is the order of business. Mr. Kessel, are there any changes to the order of business?
Decker, there are no recommended changes.
There are no changes to the order of business. Any comments or questions for Mr. Kessel on the order of business? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Motion to approve order of business.
We have a motion to approve,
Second.
and we have a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Order of business is approved. Consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that commissioners would like to discuss?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further questions or comments on the consent agenda? Now we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda is approved. We have many timetable items, so we'll go right into non-timetable. And the first up is a proclamation, Giving Hearts Proclamation. Do we have a representative from the Giving Hearts here? Seeing no one from the Giving Hearts, I'll go ahead and read this proclamation. The City of Dickinson, North Dakota, proclamation, Giving Hearts Day proclamation. In observance of Giving Hearts Day in Dickinson, North Dakota, whereas in 2008, Giving Hearts Day was created by the Dakota Medical Foundation and the Impact Foundation as the first one-day virtual fundraiser event of its kind in the region. And whereas the goals of Giving Hearts Day are to raise awareness of the charitable nonprofit sector and its organizations in North Dakota and western Minnesota, to assist the organizations in better telling their mission stories, to promote online giving, and to provide donors the opportunity to multiply the results of their giving. And whereas this 24-hour online fundraising event is dedicated to inspiring online donations for charities at impactgiveback.org. And whereas Giving Hearts Day is powerful because it inspires so many to give for the first time or to contribute to newly discovered charities. And whereas the charitable nonprofit sector provides much needed services that improve the quality of life for so many in our community. And whereas the charitable nonprofit sector supports individuals and families with quality programs, materials and funds that promote and encourage self-sufficiency. And whereas all the above listed benefits serve to strengthen the fiber of our community and make it richer for all residents. And whereas in order to provide these benefits, charities who provide these services need ongoing funds in order to provide long-term sustainable services our residents in need. And whereas these charities have demonstrated a need for collaboration and resources and have joined together for this one-day online fundraiser. Now, therefore, I, Scott Decker, President of the Dickinson, North Dakota, do hereby declare February 8th, 2018, Giving Hearts Day in Dickinson, North Dakota, and call upon public officials and business and community leaders, educators, and encourage all Dickinson citizens to observe this day with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs in order to recognize the charitable nonprofit sector and their staffs and volunteers who provide essential services that improve the quality of life for our citizens. Acknowledge that the charitable nonprofit sector is beneficial in Dickinson and Southwest North Dakota because it improves the lives, outcomes, and strengthens our community. Promote the support of charitable nonprofit sector that equips our citizens with the tools needed to lead safe, healthy, and productive lives. And support Giving Hearts Day and take action by volunteering or making financial donations to local charities in Dickinson and Southwest North Dakota at givingheartsday.org. In witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause this seal to be affixed. And I would look for a motion.
So moved.
A motion to approve the proclamation.
Second.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Official proclamation for Giving Hearts Day of February 8th. Mr. Kessel? We have a couple of these proclamations, so next one up is Arbor Day. The City of Dickinson, North Dakota proclamation, Arbor Day and Week. To all to whom these presents shall come greetings. Whereas our city, trees have been a gift to us for generations past, whose foresight and concern for the future motivated them to plant shade trees for our benefit. And whereas we must use the time we have to plant new trees so that future generations will be able to reap the benefits of shade, beauty, and environmental advantages, which we so greatly enjoy. And now, therefore, I, President of the City Commission of the City of Dickinson, North Dakota, do hereby proclaim May 18th, 2018 as Arbor Day in the City of Dickinson, North Dakota, and do further proclaim the week of May 13th to May 19th, 2018 as Arbor Week. I call upon the public-spirited and foresighted citizens of our city to plant trees now for the present and future beauty and enjoyment of all residents. In witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused this seal to be affixed. And I would look for a motion.
Motion to
So-
approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the Arbor Day proclamation and a second. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There's the Arbor Day proclamation. I have to, if I get started on this one, I have to have a drink. Our next proclamation is for the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks, Lodge 1137. Is there anyone present from the Elks? Anyone have any comments? Hearing none, I
Linda Candry.
will read the proclamation. City of Dickinson, North Dakota proclamation. Whereas on the 150th anniversary of the establishment of the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks, we celebrate the order and the Elks Lodge 1137. Commitment to selflessly serving others in need. Whereas founded in New York City on February 16, 1867 by Charles Agolnon Sidney Vivian and a handful of friends, the order has spread across the country with 7,000 North Dakota Elks members and 8 Elks Lodges. Whereas dedicated to charity, justice, and patriotism, the Elks invest millions of hours each year to build a stronger community, assist homeless veterans, and ensure kids steer away from drugs. To that end, the Elks have dispersed over the course of the order's history more than $3.6 billion in cash, goods, and services to the nation's veterans, the disadvantaged, and the handicapped, and patriotic and civic programs. Whereas the members of the Elks Lodge 1137 always puts the needs of others before themselves, from drug awareness programs, veterans programs, youth scholarships, and a very special camping experience at Elks Camp Grassic. The Elks Lodge 1137 answers the call when asked to serve. We are one of the first organizations on the ground during a crisis, providing needed supplies, relief to those affected. Whereas each day we impart lessons of hard work, dedication to community, faith in God, support to those who simply may need a hand. Youth, whereas committed to building up the next generation, the Elks rank among the top 3 private providers of scholarships for students. Each year, millions of dollars are donated by the Elks members and awarded to thousands of students as they pursue their dreams to become our nation's future leaders. Whereas one of the Order's most impressive youth programs is the Elks Hoop Shoot National Free Throw Contest. With more than 3 million annual participants between the age of 8 and 13, the odds of making it to the championship round are less than 40,000 to land than 500,000 in one. In capturing one of the 6 national titles, also the drug awareness program, whereas the Elks Drug Awareness Program is the nation's largest volunteer-based drug prevention organization. Whereas last year, the Elks and the DEA joined together to produce a YouTube video on the effects of drug use on one's physical body, future education and career opportunities and relationships have been viewed over a 500,000 times. In community service and disaster relief, whereas the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks has been and will continue to be a shining example of honor and service to neighbor, community, state, and nation. Whereas the order raised more than $1 million to help the families victimized by horrific terrorist attacks on September 11th, most recently. $50,000 to those affected hurricane in Texas and Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. In times of crisis, it has long been a pattern of the order to ease the pain of others. In witness, whereas I have hereunto set my hand and caused this seal to be affixed. I would look for a motion on this proclamation.
Could you read that one again?
So move.
Second.
I'll give you the cliff notes on that one. So we have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion on the proclamation? If not, I would look for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The Elks proclamation is signed. Pass that to Mr. All right.
You take a recess? Or?
Next up, we'll go to item B. Board of Equalization meeting date change. And for that, we'll have Mr. Hirschfeld.
Thank you, President Decker. Commissioners, thank you for having me this evening. In recognizing the changing market as far as commercial properties and changing incomes, we wanted to give ample time for property owners to submit their income data to us. The state statute sets the date as the second Tuesday in April as the date for the Board of Equalization hearing, and we must notice property owners 15 days before that. So that timeline gets pretty tight in order for property owners to finish up gleaning their data from the past year and then getting that submitted to us for us to input that data and then to make any sense out of it. So we want to make sure we've got ample time to consider any income data that's given to us this year, so requesting that we move that date back into May. We've done that in the past. I usually had the initial hearing early in May, and then that left us room to have a second meeting if necessary to do any cleanup work. I didn't bring a date or a time before you, just see what your schedule is, and we don't even need to necessarily set this tonight if that's not convenient for you. But certainly get the thought out there and on how we want to handle this, whether we want to do it ahead of a regularly scheduled meeting like we've done in the past, or you know, it may take more than that. At this point, I just don't have enough of that data to share with you, but if you have any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld?
Mr. President, I wouldn't mind seeing it like maybe the first Monday in May. I know our meeting's on Tuesday, but I'd rather go on a Monday if that works for anyone.
That would be May 7th.
Or a second Monday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to tie it in with the city commission meeting.
Well, we have a commission meeting on the 8th, so, no, I guess we have a commission meeting on
We
the
could have
1st.
it May 1.
Well, May 1, we have a commission meeting, so,
Okay. Yeah, then the 7th. May 7th would be,
anyone opposed to the 7th?
That should work.
Okay. Guess the 7th it is.
5 o'clock.
That work for everyone? 5 o'clock?
Yeah.
I would make that in the form of a
Okay.
motion.
Yes, I'd like a motion to change the
Second.
date. So, we have a motion to change the Board of Equalization to May 7th at 5 o'clock with a second. Any other discussion, questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Officially changed.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you very much.
Next item up is item C, North Parking Lot. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, President Decker. This item has appeared on our commission agenda a couple of times now. In between city commission meetings, you've received a report of all commission actions and discussions that have taken place regarding it, a financial report of funds spent and possible future expenses, a construction timeline, and a video link to all of the actions that were referenced in my first comments. The only video link that video link did not include was the motion to encumber the $170,000 to 2018. We realize as a staff that we need to do things differently with regard to projects. We've heard loud and clear that the commission wants to see an total project cost, which would include areas in which funding is provided in, let's say, multiple sources. You want to see that all included as a one project expense. That's a departure from the way that we've done it in the past, but we'll certainly change the way that we do it in the future and make sure that you're aware of all expenses, regardless of funding stream, for future projects. We also recognize that we followed probably more the intent than the letter of the law. The commission made a commission decision and vote to authorize $100,000 for this project. When we realized that the project was likely to exceed that, we did make the commission aware of the potential for excess that was delayed because of attendance at the commission meetings. And as city staff, we should have made different decisions or asked for a vote rather than a delay. So we recognize that we could have handled this project differently. We're pledging to do that in the future. And the corrective action that we'd like to see taken tonight includes a motion that was written by Attorney Murtha to approve the total incurred expenses and future expenses up to $170,000 total project cost. In the financial statement that was provided to you, the things that have not been completed yet are striping the parking stalls, lighting, fencing, tree planting and/or landscaping, and signage. If all of those things are completed based upon the estimates that we've received, we would still come in about $5,000 under the $170,000 total project cost or encumbrance that you've already made. So I'd like to answer any questions that the commission has regarding the project and recommend the motion that is before you.
Any questions for Mr. Kessel?
I guess the only one I would have, Mr. President, is, so the $21,163.32 for the sidewalks would go back into the sidewalk fund? Because we have $170,000 available.
They certainly could.
I mean, did those come out of 2018 funds, or?
This 21,000 came out of the 2017 sidewalk funds.
I mean, we've all sat here and listened to Mr. Kubas give us a list of sidewalk projects that we have in Dickinson that are gonna take 20 years to complete. I mean, I guess for me, I would like to see that money put back.
Well, if we're transferring money from our original building fund to pay for this encumbrance, and I don't see why that money can't go back to the sidewalk fund, to be used for other
To be
projects.
used for what it was intended.
Excuse me.
So, I mean, that would be my only.
Commissioner Frederick, there's no problems with doing that. I mean, from an accounting standpoint, we can certainly make that happen.
I mean, being it looks like we're gonna be under the 170 that we have available in the construction fund anyway, I don't see why it would. I think it would be prudent to put that money back, so.
I agree. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Kessel? I guess the one thing that we can take away from this is exactly what you stated, is we want to know exactly where every penny we're spending and where it's coming from, and as a total project. I know that sometimes it gets easy to parse things out from different funds and we can split it up, but we need to be as transparent as possible on everything. So that would be my only comment. And then I would look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the total incurred expenses and future expenses up to $170,000 total project cost.
Oh, a motion to approve.
I'll second.
With a second. Any further discussion or questions for staff?
The only thing I would have is, do we need to make mention of putting the 21,000 back in that motion?
Commissioner Friedrich, I just consulted with Attorney Murtha, and she feels like the motion as stated is good, and obviously your intention has been stated, and we can take care of that without an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Are you satisfied with that, Mr. Friedrich?
Yes.
So we have a motion to approve with a second. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. All right. I think we can get this done before our 4:55. We have Walmart stores. Mr. Kessel?
Walmart Stores Incorporated has changed their name simply to Walmart Incorporated. They've dropped the hyphen and they've dropped the stores from their name. Because they've done that, they hold a beer and wine license, a local liquor license, and a tobacco license, and it forces the change and us to reissue their beer and wine license and tobacco license with the approval, of course, of the City Commission. So they've made that request of us. We've done our due diligence, and we would recommend that those changes be made.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any questions for Mr. Kessel on the liquor license name change? Not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve license change.
We have a move to approve the liquor license name change for Walmart stores.
Second.
Any further discussion? Now, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The liquor license name change is approved. We'll move on to the tobacco license name change.
It is the exact same situation, same name change request.
Okay, any questions?
Move to approve tobacco license name change.
Second.
Second, all right. Any further questions or comments? Now, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Tobacco license name change is approved. We have one more. Tobacco license, Legacy 7 Liquor. Mr. Kessel.
At the last commission meeting, you approved the name change on the liquor license for this exact purpose. They're dropping the Vintage Liquor name from their official name and going to Legacy 7 Liquor LLC, doing business as Lucky's Liquor. Because they also own a tobacco license, they have brought before us a request to change the name to reflect the new name on the tobacco license, as we did with the liquor. So our recommendation is to recognize the new name.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any questions for Mr. Kessel on the tobacco dealer license for Lucky's or Legacy 7 Liquor? Not, I'd look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve the tobacco license for Legacy 7 Liquor
Second.
with a second. Any further questions or comments? Now we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman's?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The tobacco license is approved for Legacy 7. Our first timetable item is a public hearing, utility easement vacation. That will be introduced by Mr. Kubis.
Thank you, President Decker and Commissioners. I'll be introducing the next two timetables. I don't know if they'll run back to back or not, and then we'll have an MD rep coming up. But on the utility vacation easement for 1649 11th Street West, the owner is petitioning to have a portion of that utility easement vacated to facilitate a building expansion for his home and garage. All the utility companies have signed off on the vacation form, and city staff would recommend approval of the vacation. With that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Kubis on this utility vacation?
It's just the yellow line.
It's just the area shaded in yellow, yeah, they just needed a couple of feet.
Any other questions, comments? Since this is a public hearing, I'll open this up to the public. Anyone from the public like to state your case for or against this utility easement vacation? Please come forward, state your name. Seeing no one from the public has any issues, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. Kubis? Comments? Pretty standard.
The city usually has no interest in these utility easements other than, you know, for our franchise utility companies to occupy them. So once they've signed off on the vacation petition, from the engineering perspective, we usually have no issues with these.
Okay. The resolution number, Mr. Kubis, do you have that? Or 3/2018. Okay. So I would look for a motion on Resolution 3/2018.
Mr. President, I'd make a motion to approve the easement vacation what number was it, 3/2018?
3/2018, yes.
Second.
Any further questions or comments on Resolution 3/2018? Hearing none, will vote. Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman? Aye. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Resolution 3/2018 is passed. We have about 3 minutes. I don't think you can get through the community action one in 3 minutes, can you, Mr. Kessel?
I certainly can, President Decker.
Okay.
I don't intend to make any comments about the community action report other than to say, please review it at your leisure. Would you like me to do the Southwest Water?
Yeah, you can go ahead and,
Okay. We promised to provide you with the citizen interest forms of interested applicants for the Southwest Water open board position. We have received 2 that were included in your packet. We received 1 additional today, which has been distributed on your desks here this evening. At our meeting, our last meeting, your timetable included making a decision at our next city commission. We have advertised this and our openings on Special Assessment Commission on Sunday, and so we hope to receive even more interest in either of those positions. But that has, so far we've received 3 interested parties for the Southwest Water Board, and we hope to share additional ones with you prior to the commission meeting next time.
Mr. Kessel, on these applications, does the staff vet these people that they meet all the qualifications?
Yes, yeah, and when it comes to, when it comes down to the time where the commission's going to make the recommendation, we will share our insights with regards to that vetting process.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have things to share with you.
I just want to make sure that everybody is qualified there
Yep.
by the standards for Southwest Water. So we're not appointing somebody that not going to be able to.
We hope to catch those things and not allow you to do that.
Okay.
I do have one other just reminder. The State of the City address is February 8th of this week. We have advertised that as a city commission meeting, a special meeting, because we are expecting more than a quorum to be present at that meeting. We have a little insider at the chamber now, so she's been made aware of the situation and has fully agreed to cooperate with us. And then Attorney Murtha has one quick update for you on a lawsuit, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Very briefly on the Sander lawsuit, just We just received notice yesterday that summary judgment motions which had been filed were decided in favor of the city. There is a 30-day appeal to that. I would normally offer to answer any additional questions you may have, Mr. President, members of the commission. However, in speaking with our outside counsel on this matter, he indicated, and I would agree, that any additional questions would be most appropriately answered in executive session for the purposes of attorney consultation. Given that, I'm not offering to answer any questions at this time, but if you did have some, we could make arrangements to make sure that executive session was put on the agenda.
Okay. Well, I think if there's any commissioners that do have questions, we can probably set that up for the next meeting. And thank you for the update. I know I overheard Mrs. Trustum too. She said, sold all your tickets for the State of the City?
We're all sold out,
So-
240, so we're excited. It's gonna be a great event.
So that's good news. All right, we have a 5 o'clock timetable, and that would be Mr. Kubis again.
Thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. In your packet were some line relocation costs from MDU, and I apologize that there was an agreement that went along with this, with these costs that were submitted by MDU. And it was an agreement that came before this board about a year ago in February of last year, that the city agreed to pay these costs for this line relocation. This was by Kildare Mountain Manufacturing. And the costs at that time in the agreement were stated at $55,000. You can see an excerpt of the agreement is on the slide that you see on the screen here. And so MDU agreed that they would relocate this line as shown in Exhibit B. The city would pay 100% of those costs, estimated at $55,000. Obviously, you've seen the invoice. It came in at $76,435. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this was Exhibit B in the agreement. It was anticipated that 3 poles would be relocated to facilitate building a portion of 18th Avenue East by Kildare Mountain Manufacturing. As it turned out, through the design process or into construction, a couple more poles were added, and there were some other costs that were incurred by MDU. So before staff would recommend payment of the bill, we had asked MDU to come and state their case and kind of explain better than I could do why these additional costs were incurred. So Mr. John Walgren with MDU's transmission department is here today to answer any questions that you might have about the invoice that they sent and kind of the summary of those costs.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioners, I would just point out on the summary that Mr. Kubis provided a couple of items. One is there was a significant cost change with the redesign, with the addition of that additional pole, and the other major item was the contractor cost that we got on the estimates, or when we got the estimates from the contractors to do the work, they were significantly higher than what we had estimated those contractor costs would be. Some of that was because of the complexity of the project, and the scope had changed slightly since the original estimate was put together. Otherwise, I guess I would ask if there's any questions from the commission.
Any questions from commissioners? This is Mr. Walgren, right?
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Mr. Walgren? Or any questions for Mr. Kubis, I would say also.
Because Mr. Kubis, this was before my time. Explain why are we removing this? And I mean, obviously this was for Kildare Mountain. Why were they not responsible? Why did the city get involved in that? Sure, I understand.
President Decker, Commissioner Frederick, it is a unique situation. Typically, we wouldn't get involved in utility relocation costs because we have franchise agreements that say utility company, MDU in this case, can occupy our right-of-way, and if we need you to move, that the move would be at the utility company's cost. this particular line has been there for many, many decades, and it actually, MDU has an easement on this line that predated any city right-of-way. And so when we looked at this, MDU has kind of that first right to be on this property. Our right-of-way got platted on top of their easement. This goes back, I think the MDU easement was from the 60s. The plat was in the 70s when it became the Anfinson store back then. So as part of the development agreement with Kildare Mountain Manufacturing, they were required to build a portion of 18th Avenue East, which was in that plat, which they did at their cost. The utility relocation cost was agreed to be the city's because, again, their easement predated our right-of-way for 18th Avenue East. And so that's where the agreement was approved back in February of last year, just between, not with Kildare Mountain Manufacturing, but between MDU and the city to pay those costs that, again, were estimated at $55,000. Did that answer the kind of the background of the project?
And then the overruns are attributed to, I mean, it's like a 50% overrun, so.
Well, and that's why I asked Mr. Walgren to come today, because I guess I don't understand that well the transmission business and the design and the costs that go into that. So to better explain those overruns, I guess that's why MDU is here today.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can explain, but I mean, I could see 10%, but we're talking like almost 50%. So,
Yeah, in this situation, this is a small project in terms of typical transmission projects, and some of the specialized
You might have to come up closer.
some of the specialized materials that we use in situations like this, such as the laminated wood poles, where we cross the Business 94 corridor, they're fairly expensive. They're extremely expensive compared to a regular round wood pole that we normally would use in tangent situations. And so even small changes in the sizes of those poles can have a significant impact on the overall cost, not only of the pole or the structure, but also of the installation of the structure and the design as well. And in this situation, that was one of the items in this project that ended up being significantly larger than the original assumptions that were made when we looked at the project. And so it's somewhat of a snowball effect, and with those larger poles, then it's a significant price adder, which also then is a significant increase in installation costs. And so it's because it is such a small project, it's a change like this becomes a very large percentage of the project cost based compared to the original estimate.
Mr. President?
Mr. Stein?
I'm concerned about the 50% overrun. Even though you think it's a small project, 50% on a $50,000, it gets up 71,000 or whatever. I'm struggling with that. The engineering charges are higher than estimate because the consultant was hired to perform the design survey and field staking work. The decision to use a consultant was driven by the deadline of the project and the workload of MDU's internal staff. Was that ever brought to the city for approval?
That was not, and MDU made the decision to absorb some of those costs that we incurred as a result of using a consultant compared to in-house.
Okay, but I don't know if they're absorbing those costs. Engineering change order. The engineering change order charges related to redesign of the project that were a result of KMN's request to shift the pole. KMN's request to shift the pole to accommodate the traffic flow. The design of KMN parking lot loading dock was not provided to MDU when the initial design was completed. How much of that is part of this extra 21,000?
That redesign, that fee was of $8,500.
8,500?
Then my question with that is KMM requested that, why are they not stepping up to pay that portion?
It seems to me that of the three parties, the city is the one left holding bag, I guess. I don't know if I can vote to approve this additional cost.
Maybe you could just walk us through your invoice and go over each item, because I don't understand what's overhead adjusted.
So we have, on all of our construction projects, capital construction projects, we have two separate overheads that we add to cover our, one of them is the ES, which is engineering and supervision, and the other one is GA, which is general and administrative. Basically, it's a way to cover our fixed costs that we have associated with doing business. Our overhead rate is a certain percentage determined by our accounting department. On this particular invoice, they took just a portion of the overhead, since the total project was more than the 76,000. They took, and for the project costs that MDU absorbed internally, then we also absorbed the overheads that are associated with that portion of the project. And so that's why you see it as overheads adjusted, because they reduce that to make it the same percentage of the other line items in the invoice, as if that was the total of the project.
So, what did MDU absorb? How much was the total project cost?
That was well over $100,000. I don't have the exact figures with me.
Yeah, I understand some of this overrun stuff. I mean, the change order though for 8470, that was a request by KMM. I'm not sure why we're holding the bag on that.
I think that maybe some of the questions, Mr. Kubus can look into some of your questions, and maybe are we on a timeline to approve this?
Well, the agreement, as it was approved, stated just, like most billing, 30 days from invoicing to pay. We received this invoice shortly after the first of the year. I'd been in discussion not with Mr. Walgren, but with Mr. Zettel from the local MDU office here, talking about arranging this meeting since the percentage of the overrun was rather high. So there is a timeline. I guess couldn't speak as to MDU's position on that timeline, but it was 30 days from invoicing.
So we're past due on that. The date of the invoice is 29 December. So we're already past due on it.
Yeah, I guess we received it if there's a date stamp on it shortly after the first of the year. So.
Okay, and then the portion of the total cost will be reimbursed to the city. Do we know what that, at the bottom of the invoice there? What that?
I don't know what portion that they would be referring to that would be reimbursed to the city.
It says by the city.
Oh.
It must be just an internal note, I'm assuming.
Oh, okay. I'm my mistake on that. So I guess there's a few. It seems to me there's a few questions that need to be answered. we can delay this to, table it, I guess, to the next meeting.
I think we need to request an adjustment. I don't know why we should be paying the $8,470 for the engineering change order, which was Kilder Mountain Manufacturing. If you take that out, it's down to about 66,000, somewhere, 68,000, somewhere around there. Still 13,000 overhead adjusted.
Mr. President,
I think
Yeah.
we have to look at it a little more closer on some other items too.
how much of the how much of the change order changed all those other numbers on top of that?
That change order was just for the design and staking changes.
So the 8470 is the total cost of that change order? It didn't change the engineering or the labor or?
Correct.
Well, between the engineering change order and the overhead adjustment, project would have came in on budget,
Pretty close.
pretty close, pretty dang close. So I would have a question on those two charges as well.
And my question is, was that, I know it says shift the pole to accommodate the traffic flow. I mean, was that more of an aesthetic change or was it a necessary change?
So in the original design, one of the poles was basically blocking their loading dock. So they wouldn't have been able to safely back a tractor trailer up to their loading dock.
And the original design was an internal design by your engineers, am I correct?
The original design was based on shifting the location of the existing poles approximately 13 feet to the west to make room for the curb and gutter. When the original design was completed, we didn't have any information from KMM on their future plans or their design for their portion of their property.
Any further questions, comments?
I would suggest we table this and go back to the parties and get this figured out.
Give Mr.
I don't
Kubas-
think it's fair the way it is, so
Give Mr. Kubas a couple more weeks, work on it.
instead of a vote to deny it, I just assume table it.
We have a motion to table this item
Second.
for the second. Any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. This item is tabled on the next meeting. Thank you, sir. We have a 5:10, and that is Nelson Nygaard presentation. Mrs. Monahan?
My name's Colleen Radikowski, the director over at Public Transit. I'd like to introduce Patty Monahan to you. She's the principal at Nelson Nygaard Consulting in Boston, Massachusetts. We've been working the past over a year on the transit study for public transit, and which included the town of Dickinson for fixed routes. So I want to thank the commissioners for the 20% match for this project. We're so grateful that we were able to partner with Nelson Nygaard in this study. So thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to go over the findings and the recommendations from the study pretty quickly so that we have some time for questions. But if there's anything you'd like me to clarify as we're going through this, please let me know. So as you're all aware, Elder Care operates public transit service in Dickinson. This is a demand response service, which means it's scheduled in advance. It can be scheduled on the day of service as well as the day before service. It's open to the general public, serves primarily the city plus a 5-mile area, and trips to Bismarck and the airport are also available. The goals of the study were to look at the existing system, identify strengths and weaknesses, and then recommend service improvements that could serve existing riders even better, attract new riders, and improve the efficiency of the system. So we had a 3-part approach to the study. We looked at the market for public transportation in the city. We looked at what the how the existing service was performing, what that could tell us, and then we asked the community members and stakeholders for their input. So what did the market analysis show? In transportation planning, fixed route service, which is a regular city bus that operates along a fixed route and a fixed schedule, can be supported ridership-wise with a density of people and jobs at roughly 6 to 15 people and jobs per acre. So on this map, anything that's orange or red is that density or higher. So as you can see, most of the city has the density that could generate the ridership to support a basic level of fixed route service. And another factor to take into account is major activity centers, that they can also help to make a fixed route service successful. This map shows the origins and destinations of public transit riders, and this map confirms the map above, that people are traveling to the areas where the fixed route service would be, where the density is available to support fixed route service. So our conclusions here are that much of Dickinson could support fixed route service and at the same time serve the key groups and destinations that are using public transit today. When we looked at this existing services, we found that compared to some peer systems in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Minnesota, public transit provides a high level of service. And in response to a customer survey that Public Transit conducted in late 2016, the riders gave it very high marks for service quality. But there are a couple of challenges that the system has faced in recent years. The longer hours of service that it operated in the evenings over several years to replace the taxi service that had left Dickinson were expensive hours of service to provide. They generated very low ridership. Public transit faced higher costs of wages and benefits to compete with oil industry jobs during the boom years, and that caused a lot of staff turnover and higher costs of goods and services in general during those years. And finally, the cost of living in Dickinson rose to the point that regular customers moved out of the area, and this transit service suffered from that as well. So there are some challenges, but they represent opportunities to lower costs, increase revenues, and attract new riders, and that's what our recommendations are aiming to do. To summarize, the third piece of the approach was the outreach to stakeholders. We were on site in March of 2017 doing a series of public meetings, a large group stakeholder meeting, and doing intercept surveys at destinations that generated a lot of traffic to find out what people thought about current services and their transportation needs. And then we came back in July and repeated the public meetings and the stakeholder discussion to get some feedback on some potential service improvements. The survey was, that told us the most. The attendance at the public meetings, except for the one that we had at DSU, was pretty low. So the survey is our main take on what the public thinks. And we found that there were nearly 2/3 of the current riders who didn't have access to a vehicle. And 41% of the public riders use the survey weekly, so it's very important to them. On the graph, the users are shown in red and non-users are shown in gray. Destinations, people are going everywhere on the service. Medical services was a big one. Also, shopping, different types of shopping, destinations, other locations, some work trips, and other types of trips as well. There was strong support for a fixed route bus system in Dickinson among both the current riders and non-users. 75 and 78% respectively thought the time was right to start thinking about fixed route service, and 63% of existing riders and 45% of non-riders said they would use it if it were available. That's very encouraging. So our recommendations fell into two categories. One was new fixed route services, and the other category was a variety of strategies that could be implemented without new fixed service, either to lower costs or increase revenues, or to encourage ridership by enhancing the service in different ways. We have broken the recommendations down into phases. The first phase in the next 1 to 3 years really focuses on some improvements to the demand response service, new shopper shuttles, which I'll describe more in a minute, and a new late night service for DSU students. In the medium term, 3 to 5 years, there's the implementation of a new fixed route service. I'll describe that as well in a minute. And Americans with Disabilities Act paratransit service that would be required to accompany that fixed route service. That's a federal requirement. And then in phase 3, there would be a full-scale implementation of fixed route service with modifications to the ADA paratransit that would be required.
Can I stop you there and have you
Sure.
go back to that slide?
This one?
Phase 1, last one, new DSU late night service.
I'm going to explain
Okay.
these in more detail. This is just to
Thank
give
you.
you a kind of the big picture. So in phase 1, the first recommendation was to cut back the service hours in the evening and on Sundays, early morning. The ridership during these periods is very low, was very low, and it was expensive to provide drivers and vehicles without customers to bring fare revenues in. So the savings by eliminating those evening hours and the early morning Sunday service is over $100,000 a year. And we found when we looked at the peer systems that only 3 of the 8 provide service after 6, so cutting back the hours is in line with what other systems of this type do. There were customers who were using the evening service for work trips, so our recommendation is to consider replacing that evening service with a taxi subsidy program. And the way these programs operate, public transit would sell a taxi ticket or voucher to an eligible user at a percentage of its face value. The customer would redeem that voucher or ticket with a participating taxi company at its face value, and the taxi company would then submit the voucher to public transit to be reimbursed at the face value. So this is a very cost-effective way to provide service. It's flexible. These are very popular programs wherever they're implemented. But there are a couple of concerns here. One is the quality of the taxi service, which may not be strong enough. And there would also be a requirement to provide accessible vehicles, and it seems like that might be difficult to achieve here as well. So what we're recommending is that an RFP, request for proposals, be issued to see what the interest from the taxi companies would be, to see if there would be a qualified taxi vendor that could participate in this program. So that's something to explore a little bit more down the road. Oh, I should mention that the service hours were cut back at the end of 2017, so this is already in place. Another aspect of the current service is the fare policy for the same-day trips. The original policy was that if a customer requested a trip afternoon on the day before the trip or the day of the trip, the ride was provided and the fare was $8, which is twice the regular public transit fare. So the changed policy reduces that fare to $4 and makes space available, provides the trip only if space is available. So the customer isn't guaranteed the trip, but if they get the trip, it's a reduction of fare from $8 to $4. And obviously, this reduces the fare revenues that come into public transit, but it responds to very strong concerns we heard from both customers and stakeholders that $8 for a one-way trip was too expensive, especially if people were using service to go to work. So the reduction in the fare encourages people to make, the fact that they aren't guaranteed a trip encourages people to reserve in advance, so the scheduling is easier, the efficiency of the schedules improves. And even at $4, the fare is still above the state average for a demand-responsive trip. And among the peer systems, the $4 fare is higher than all but one of them. And this is another change that public transit made at the end of 2017. Okay, so the DSU late night service would be operation of a vehicle 2 evenings a week, probably Friday and Saturday, for 4 hours in the evening to provide service into downtown Dickinson for a fare of, say, $2 or $3. And this responds to comments we heard from students when we were holding the public meeting at the college, and they filled out surveys. They told us, we would like to get downtown at night, and we would like to get to Walmart and do our banking and have a way to do errands like that at some point during the week. So this responds to the request for the service downtown. And among the peer systems, there are examples of very successful services of this type where our transit system has partnered with a local college or university. They're typically very heavily used services. They can be funded with a student fee that's collected from all students and used for the contract between the school and the transit provider. And in this case, there was support from DSU officials for the service, and they believed that maybe not immediately, but there was the potential for a student fee that would cover the cost of the service. So this would boost the productivity of public transit and bring in additional revenues. So does that answer your question, Commissioner Steiner?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
The Bismarck service was also something we looked at. There are very few riders per trip, and of course that's a long trip to provide the drivers on the road for 6 to 8 hours, providing that service. And there are some restrictions due to the fact that some of those trips are Medicaid trips. But we see some potential for working with the people that schedule appointments, medical appointments, to make sure that the medical appointments are grouped so that the vehicle is fuller than it is today. And there is also the potential to look at sharing a service with other transit systems that go through Dickinson on their way to Bismarck. This is the shopper shuttle recommendation is probably the biggest element of the phase 1 recommendations. And we heard through the outreach that people were looking to go to Walmart in particular, but also to other shopping destinations. And you can do that today. You can call in advance and reserve a trip and be taken to the store, but people wanted a quicker, easier way to do that. So what we're proposing is a flexible route which combines a fixed route and a demand response element. The one vehicle would be dedicated to the shopper shuttle, and it could take as many people as could fit on the vehicle. It would follow a fixed route according to a fixed schedule, but people who can't get to the stop would have the ability to call in advance and get a pickup at their door. So the route would travel from stop to stop, deviating as necessary to pick up people who needed the door-to-door service. This would be offered at a lower fare than the other demand response service to encourage people to take their shopping trips this way. And it would introduce a service that operates with some fixed route and fixed schedule components to the community as a foundation for eventual fixed route service on a bigger scale. So these routes are a little bit on top of each other, but the idea would be that on the east side of the city, the red route would operate on Monday and Wednesday, and people that live in that part of the city could take their trips. On the green route on the west side would operate Tuesday and Thursday and do the same thing, take people from the residential areas to the shopping destinations. And then the blue route, which is sort of in the middle and hard to see, that would serve DSU students on Friday or Saturday to go to Walmart and do their business. And the routes serve Walmart and grocery stores and other businesses along those routes. And the final piece of phase one is some additional system marketing to complement the changes. And the goal of the marketing campaign would to be increase awareness of the services, make sure everyone knows about changes that are being implemented, generate support among the community in general, and to attract new riders. And we also think there's some reason to tweak the brand a bit, maybe add Dickinson to the title of the system to make sure people understand that this is a service that's available to all Dickinson residents. It's not just for seniors or people with disabilities, and to acknowledge the contribution that the city makes to the service. So the marketing campaign would start in phase one, but it would carry over into phases 2 and 3 as well. In phase 2, the recommendation is to begin to implement fixed route service. And the goal here would be to serve high density areas where people are living, make sure that major destinations are covered. And we think that this could be accomplished with 4 different routes. And because of the way transit vehicles and drivers are scheduled, it would make sense to pair 2 routes together. So you'd have routes 1 and 3 operating as a pair, using the same vehicle and driver, and routes 2 and 4. The fare would be less than the demand response service. We use $2 in our cost estimates because that would encourage people to use this cheaper per trip service than the door-to-door service. And this would be the eventual goal. 4 different routes. We have a red, a blue, a green, and an orange. And they would operate with 2 hours between trips, which is a minimal level of fixed route service, but it makes sense to start with that and add to it as ridership and demand grows. The routes are designed to connect the residential areas with all the services and businesses in the city. And all 4 routes would converge at Walmart, so people could transfer from one route to another. And there would be an opportunity to transfer from routes 1 and 2 in downtown Dickinson as well. So with this 4-route system, you could travel wherever you needed to go through the city. So as I said, this is the goal. Oh, excuse me, I missed this one. ADA paratransit service is a federal requirement when a public or private entity that receives public transit funding provides fixed route service. The goal of the paratransit service is to provide an option for people who can't use a fixed route bus system because of their disability. And the service has to meet 6 different criteria to make sure that it's comparable to fixed route service. And there's a requirement for an eligibility determination process. So people have to go through some kind of process where they submit information or undergo an interview or an in-person assessment to show that they are unable to use the fixed route system because of their disability. The 4-route system is a goal, and we presented that in the July meetings we had to get feedback on them. And in the stakeholder meeting, it was actually Mr. Kessel and an official from DSU who pointed out that if you phased in routes 1 and 3 and routes 2 and 4 at different times, you'd leave a lot of the areas of the city unserved until the whole system was implemented. So we went back and came up with this modification of routes 1 and 2 that serve the high priority destinations and the residential areas. And our recommended service plan is to operate this, I'm calling it a starter service, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7, and Saturday, 10 to 7, with a $2 fare. The 88 paratransit would operate the same days and hours for higher fare of $4, and there would be some continuation of public transit's current demand response service for people who live too far away from this fixed route system to use it. So this is a more detailed look at these two routes and some recommended stops. And locations where you'd want to have at least a sign and an ADA compliant concrete pad for deployment of a wheelchair lift and wheelchair users. At more heavily used stops, you'd probably want to add some other amenities like shelters and benches. Okay, and then in phase 3 would be the implementation of full fixed route service. And here the 2 routes we just looked at would be replaced by those 4 routes that we talked about first. Same kinds of operating parameters, Monday through Friday service, slightly limited service on Saturday, a $2 fare, 88 paratransit, and that continued limited demand response for people who live too far from this fixed route system to use it. Here we have a couple of charts that have the estimated annual net operating cost of each phase. So this is the cost to operate the service based on estimated number of vehicle hours and public transit's current vehicle hour cost minus the estimated fare revenues. And this, for phase 1, the total of almost $881,000 would be less than what the total operating expense was in 2015, which was about $994,000.
Is this labor cost?
This is everything.
Everything?
Yeah. It's all operating costs. It doesn't include costs of building bus stops or anything like that. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's all operating costs.
Doesn't include the cost of the vehicle itself.
That's coming. That you're
All right,
ahead
very
of me.
good.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. So in phase 2, because this is where we'd implement that starter fixed route service, so the number of vehicle hours of service would increase. The 88 paratransit would start to take the place of the demand response service, but not quite replace it. So the cost would be still less than the 2015 operating costs. And then in phase 3, where we would implement all 4 fixed routes, have a full 88 paratransit service, scale back on the demand response service, the cost would be about $1.5 million. And the DSU service would continue through all these 3 phases as well. So here is a more detailed look at the cost that includes the cost of capital, which is partly bus stops and work to the streets that would allow the bus stops to be constructed or installed, and also vehicles. Now, we're not projecting that any new vehicles would be required to operate the fixed route service. The vehicles that are operating in demand response service now would just convert to fixed route service. It's the same size vehicle, but much of public transit's current fleet is either due for replacement or overdue for replacement, or will be due for replacement over the life of this planning period we're looking at. So we have estimated when the vehicles would need to be replaced, and that's a large part of the capital cost. So I don't know if this has a pointer.
Can I ask
Yes.
you a question here?
Yes.
I'm looking at the estimated local match. The local match requirement, 493,000 for the total. Is the city of Dickinson considered your local match, or is that the county, or?
You're ahead of me again. That's
All right.
Yep. So, so up at the, and I have to say that we've looked at what the vehicle replacement requirements would be in an ideal world, and public transit does not operate in an ideal world, and you have not been able to replace your vehicles on the schedule that you would hope. So this is, again, something to shoot for, but it probably, funding would constrain this vehicle replacement plan. But we do show the vehicles, and then there's some dollars in here for a minimal amount of bus stops and signs and some shelters. So the annual net operating costs are down here. The local match, and here on this line we put it all together. We made assumptions about how much state and federal funding would be available based on what public transit gets today. And in general, the federal funds will cover 50% of operating costs and 80% of capital costs, leaving a 50% share of operating that has to be found somewhere, and a 20% share of the capital costs. So, potential sources, the federal funds include not only the federal transit funds that public transit uses now, Section 5311 and 5310, but also a capital program, 5339, that public transit has not been receiving grants from. That's administered by North Dakota DOT. And there is there's a federal highway program, the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, that North Dakota DOT also administers, and that would be available to the city. The city would be the eligible applicant for the urban roads. These are North Dakota names: urban roads programs and the primary and secondary regional program. And those funds could be used to do the work at the bus stops that would be needed to install the concrete pads and signs, and it could be also used for the signs and shelters and benches and other amenities that are installed. There are a couple of other federal programs that could be used as match to the federal transit and federal highway funds. The state of North Dakota provides state aid funding for public transit. That would be a large player in the financial picture. And then on the truly local end, all of the sources of local revenue that public transit uses now would be matched for those federal funds. So that's the local City of Dickinson sales tax, the contribution that the city makes, the mill levy for senior services, donations, fundraising, income from service contracts with nursing homes and other organizations, and also advertising and vehicle sponsorships. And we made some recommendations for increasing that vehicle sponsorship revenue as well. So this is a very encouraging funding picture. Usually, there's the possibility of local match is much dimmer. So this is very encouraging. It would not be all on the city.
Do we know how long those federal funding sources, is there a timeline on how long that process usually takes?
To receive the funds, they usually are granted every year. So and then you have 3 years to use them from the year that they're granted.
And my question would be then, I guess, with the federal dollars, as tight as everything is getting with federal dollars, and to include state dollars, what's the likelihood you get what you're projecting as a grant, a full grant?
I think you're pretty safe. There have been political changes up and down, and these funds, sometimes they increase, sometimes they're not increasing. They're held at a static level, but they don't go away. So of course, I guess I can't say that I believe that there's absolutely no chance that things will change, but it's, in my experience over time, the federal funding it's something people fight for, so it stays intact.
Yeah, and you're aware of our state situation also. I mean, as, you know, oil goes up, we have more money than we know what
Right.
to do with, and then as it drops down, we fall into this cycle again. The state does anyway.
Right.
So, I guess I would count always in getting the same amount of dollars from the state, but. Well, Mr. Kessel has a question or a comment.
Ms. Monahan, you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you had had conversations with DSU officials about the implementation of a student fee as opposed to paying a per-ride expense or cost. Did you include that student fee scenario in your funding requirements at all, or was that simply left out?
We left that out. We estimated a fare that students would pay to get on the bus every time they rode it, rather than a contract that would cover the cost of the service.
Okay, and in light of, thank you, in your discussions with DSU officials, was there a fee that was discussed that would be potentially acceptable to students, or was that left up to the student senate?
No, we didn't discuss that in that detail. And and I can never remember the woman from DSU that we were speaking to, what her name is, but she felt that there was some fee that was in place now for something in particular, but that was going away, and so there might be room for instituting a fee for the transportation service at a later date, because apparently students would rather pay a fee and not have to worry about paying for doing their laundry or taking the bus or other things. So she was very optimistic.
I went to college under my undergraduate degree at Morehead State, and the transit system there, you just flashed your ID, your student ID, and you were able to ride the transit system anywhere. I assume that's still in place, and that's the type of system you're
That's-
talking
yes.
about implementing here.
Right, so every student would pay whatever, $5 or something in their fees when they start the year, and whether they rode the bus or not, they'd pay the fee, and then it would be open to everybody.
So, Mr. Kessel, I know that this was a presentation, but, you know, ideally, what are you looking for implementation if we were to proceed with this? What direction are you looking for?
Commissioner Trustum, I think there's a lot of questions yet to be answered. They've done a really nice job of providing us some potential, some things to think about. And the type of dollars, even though it's rosy, according to Ms. Monahan, it's still, we would need partners, in my opinion, to execute to phase 3 of this plan. And that's not been all flushed out yet. So I'm hesitant to provide any direction as of yet until we're able to look into it a little bit more.
Was there any talk of on the vehicles advertising, selling advertising?
Yes, and public transit does that today, and the revenues that come in from that, the vehicle sponsorship are not as high as they could be, so we made some recommendations based on another system of a more aggressive pricing policy for vehicle sponsorship that could raise some more revenue.
And I was thinking too, if eventually we did move in that direction, bus stops, advertising at bus stops and that sort of. One last I have one last question anyway. I know you have your optimized route, or as you think is optimized. Is there the ability within this plan to adjust the route accordingly to just say there's no interest on, or very low interest along one route, and you can adjust then
Yes.
to accommodate that?
And this is what makes sense to us based on transit planning guidelines. But if you were to move forward with implementing anything, you'd want to take a really hard look at it and make sure that it meets everyone's needs, and it's bound to change in between planning and implementation.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Mrs. Monahan?
I would just say an overall comment.
think this was a good study. You know, we've wondered for a long time what the feasibility would be, what the fixed routes would be, how you would pull this community together, and how the funding would fall into place too. And although there are a lot of questions, we actually have a lot of answers that we haven't had before to make this decision. So thank you. You did a
Thank you.
wonderful job.
And there's lots more detail in the report, the final project report, which I'm sure you could get a copy of if you're interested or having trouble sleeping. And it's a reference document you could use as you move forward.
I really enjoyed the presentation. I think we've been talking about this for years, and I like to see somewhat implemented. But what I'm gonna say is really premature, so I can't say I'd like to keep it in here with Channel 19, but you know, you're looking for 500,000 basically for a local match. And the local match, I'm considering it would be the city of Dickinson. Currently, we have a 1.5% sales tax. There's been talk of implementing, no, it's just a talk of implementing another 0.5%. You know, I would certainly entertain some thinking from the board here that a 0.5% sales tax would bring an additional $2 million. And we've been talking about more funds for our public safety, which are police and fire department. If you took a 0.5% sales tax, which is about $2 million, and you put 50% to the public safety with police, fire, you take the other 25% of the 0.5 cent, and we finish this project with the downtown association. The our plaza, so to speak. And the other 25% of the 0.5% would take care of the city funding side all the way through, what you're looking at here. Something to think about, because I know we've been talking about some things, so I like the idea.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Ms. Monahan, you also had some sneaky advertising. I don't know if you're aware, but that picture up there with the gentleman and the child is Mr. Murtha and the baby.
Is it really? That's so
It's everywhere. We use that picture in project descriptions and
That is so funny.
My youngest, yeah.
Okay, we have another timetable item on our agenda, and that is a Morton County Thank You Appreciation Plaque. Chief Dossinger.
Actually,
Mr. Kessler, you're gonna?
I actually have the plaque for Mr. Or for Chief Dossinger. If I'll read the
Okay.
the accompanying letter, and then I think Chief Dossinger has some officers present that will make a presentation too. So if you'll indulge me, this is from the Morton County Sheriff and the Morton County Commission Chairperson. In August of 2016, protesters began gathering in southern Morton County, just north of the Standing Rock Sioux Indian Reservation, in opposition to construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. We could not have predicted the unprecedented challenges that the next 8 months would bring. The unlawful protest activity tested our law enforcement, state and community leaders, and our citizens both personally and professionally. Law enforcement and emergency responders worked diligently each day to uphold the law and keep everybody safe. And the 8-month-long protest response was no exception. We're very grateful to you for partnering with us to ensure no lives were lost or serious injury occurred from our efforts to maintain law and order. From law enforcement and National Guardsmen to behind-the-scenes administrators and emergency management officials, the restraint and professionalism displayed by those who stood alongside Morton County during this difficult time cannot be reiterated enough. When faced with the unknown, everyone drew upon their area of expertise and provided the necessary assistance that was vital to the success of our goal to maintain public safety. Many of us endured coordinated attacks, some aimed at our families. Fortunately, we had tremendous community support through expressions of appreciation, donations, and employers who allowed their National Guardsmen to be deployed during the protest response. We are so grateful for all the spouses and families who sacrificed so much, which meant you missed children's activities, family time, and special occasions in order to return to work day after day during seemingly unending standoffs amidst the many false narratives circulating on social media. We give credit to leadership and service at every level, and it was a privilege to stand beside you to get the job done. Everyone safely returned to their homes because you had our back. Please accept this gift as a symbol of our deep appreciation for the many hours, days, and months of support you provided in order to allow Morton County to continue its long-standing tradition of service, its citizens with honor and integrity. Sincerely signed by Kyle Kirchmeyer, the Morton County Sheriff, and Cody Schultz, the Morton County Commission Chairperson. In addition, they have a plaque that states, presented with gratitude in recognition of outstanding and dedicated service to the citizens of Morton County during the Dakota Access Pipeline protest from August 10th, 2016 to March 31st of 2017. Again, signed by Cody Schultz and Kyle Kirchmeyer. And they want to present this to the Dickinson Police Department. Gentlemen, if I may, I know that you were in Bismarck. I know that you all served to protect the citizens of North Dakota. And it's with pride that I am allowed to present to you this plaque from the Morton County Sheriff's Department. Congratulations, everybody. Thank you. Chief Dossinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. DAPL was certainly very tasking on the law enforcement, Morton County, Burleigh County. We had several staff members that, not only just the ones that you've seen here, but we had several staff members that helped not only at DAPL, but also at the state capitol, provided security at various times. And we're just very thankful that we were able to help our brothers and sisters in law enforcement to the east of us. So.
Well, I know they're very appreciative, and I think our community is very appreciative, too, of the effort put forward by our police department and our law enforcement members. I know it's no easy task being out on the line like that. And it's great that we have, a department such as ours that stands with their brothers across the state and helps support them in their time of need. So it's, kudos to you guys as a department. You do an outstanding job, leadership. So
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll lead into the next time two tables. First of all, you'll hear from Sergeant Mike Hannell. He's our tactical team commander. He's going to be doing a presentation on the 2017 annual report for the Southwest Tactical Team. And then following him, you'll hear from Sergeant Kylan Klauser, who's the sergeant in charge of our investigative unit.
Thanks, Chief. President Decker, Commissioners, good evening. Mike Hannell, I'm the current tactical commander for the Southwest Tactical Team. Just provide you a 2017 yearly report of some of our activities that we accomplished last year. The team itself, we were established back in 2003, shortly after 9/11. A lot of agencies our size looked at the need for having tactical assets available to resolve critical incidents, and we followed suit as well. Our mission is to provide a well-equipped, highly trained, and skilled tactical team as a resource for agencies to successfully resolve critical incidents with the intent of preserving life and protecting citizenry. Some of the our main topic points, or our main response points, are high-risk search and arrest warrants, barricaded subjects, hostage rescue, crowd control, as we saw in DAPL, dignitary protection, and counter sniper. We're very judicious as far as when we decide to respond to a call that would require SWAT. We utilize a risk assessment to determine if the call that we're going to is reasonable and necessary for a SWAT deployment, and then we take into account a suspect's criminal history, their propensity for violence when under the influence of alcohol or drugs, mental stability, the location, the time to prep. A lot of things go into when we decide to deploy. And as far as deploying, we are a regional team as of 2010. We're responsible for the southwest sector of North Dakota. There's 6 other agencies, well actually 7 now. Williston and Williams County have just started their own SWAT team, and they have now taken control over some of northwest North Dakota. We've relinquished some territory for McKenzie County, although I can't say I'm necessarily disappointed in that, but we still have, we're plenty busy around our neck of the woods as it is. And the perks of being a regional team, it allows us to have access to numerous Homeland Security grants, which we obtained a significant amount of equipment over the years. And we're also allowed reimbursement from a state fund if we happen to respond outside of our jurisdiction to assist another agency. Our wages and ammunition costs are reimbursed for that. As our callouts last year, pretty much any other bar graph that you can see associated with oil development or oil production kind of seemed to have a similar trend. Obviously, we were down from the peak of the boom with 6 callouts last year. 2016 would have probably been similar suit. About 5 of those were all DAPL related, so had the pipeline protests not occurred, we probably wouldn't have had 5 deployments out of that, and that would have been indicated lower as well. Specifically, of those 6 callouts that we've had from last year, many of them, about half of them were here in Dickinson, half of them were outside agency assists. The first one that we had was a North Dakota Highway Patrol pursuit that turned into a barricade around the Elgin location, and the suspect fled and barricaded into a farmstead. That's actually West Dakota SWAT's territory from Bismarck, but they were tied up at DAPL at the time, so we assisted on that call. Shortly after that, we responded to Reeder, just outside of New England, for a high-risk search and arrest warrant for an aggravated assault subject. There were actually several subjects involved with that one, as well as a drug nexus, so we obtained assistance from the National Guard Air Unit out of Bismarck, which is the FLIR image in the corner, dictated in the corner there. We have a really good working relationship with the Guard, especially on a big area like this farmstead, and the number of people we had. They provide surveillance, aerial surveillance while we're on our mission. About midsummer, we had the United States Marshals contact us to let us know there was a wanted fugitive in our town that posed a risk. So we decided to activate SWAT on that one. That was without incident. A little while after that one, patrol responded to a domestic on the south side of town in which shots were fired. Everybody in the home was able to exit safely, with the exception of the suspect. He maintained inside and barricaded. SWAT responded to that one, and after a couple hours, we resolved that, negotiated him to surrender. And then about mid-fall, probably our most challenging or longest, both in hours and distance, we were called by the Carter County Sheriff's Office in Montana to assist them in apprehending a murder suspect. This individual had murdered a family member and then barricaded himself in a farmstead just outside of Ekalaka. I wasn't aware that the edge of the earth actually exists, but it is outside of Ekalaka, Montana. There's very limited cell service, medical response, very limited on that, so there's a lot of challenges that presented itself. And we also learned that we are actually the closest SWAT agency on the eastern Montana side. So since then, we're starting to get in some talks and negotiations about MOUs and whatnot across state line. This particular one, we were able to activate NEMAC, the Northern Emergency Mutual Aid Compact, between the two emergency managements of each respective states, and we were able to accomplish that. And our last mission was a high-risk narcotics search warrant for the task force towards the end of the year. We were also contacted on 3 other occasions from other outside agencies asking for a response, but we utilized that risk analysis I was speaking of earlier and determined that those calls didn't necessarily meet the requirements for a SWAT deployment, so we instead just gave them some tips and suggestions of how they could resolve that on a patrol level. The last one there, though it did actually resolve itself here last week, we're tracking a known fugitive out of California that was potentially up in Dickinson, a Bakersfield, California gang member with a significant criminal history and an active warrant for himself. There were actually bounty hunters involved from California, and they were tracking him through town all last year, and then finally they got the tip they were looking for, and we located him at a shop just north of town in Stark County. So we deployed to that, and he surrendered within a couple minutes or so after he saw us pull up. So worked out pretty well, got him into custody. One matrix I do like to track is just the number of operators, officers that respond to a call out. Our team itself is currently 22 members from Dickinson PD, Stark County, and Dunn County. Generally, just because of vacations and other trainings and whatnot, we don't always have 22 people show up at a scene, even though that would be nice. In fact, the National Tactical Officers Association, the NTOA, they're the the national agency that offers SWAT guidance and policy and training across the nation, they suggest we should really be using 17 to 20 operators to safely mitigate a SWAT situation. Last year we were averaging about 9.3, so that gives me a little bit of a guidance as far as what we need to do to recruit patrol members to want to be on the SWAT, because it is a purely volunteer assignment. Nobody is assigned to be on SWAT. It just comes with between our patrol and detectives ranks to volunteer on that. So we're doing okay with that. In fact, some of the, I would imagine that 17 to 20 suggestions are going to come down in a couple of years, simply because the tactics that we're using are a little bit different. And without getting into much detail, the days of us, just kicking in the front door and running as fast as we can to resolve a situation, those days are very limited. And the tactics we utilize now actually would, we're able to successfully do missions with limited numbers. One of the accomplishments that we did make here last year was, again, with the NTOA guidance, we achieved enough members to become a SWAT Tier 2 team, is what they designate us now. We're able to complete all those, the high-risk search warrants, up into deliberate hostage rescue. The deliberate hostage rescues are a little bit more complex. They require a lot more bodies. So if we were to have a situation like that, we'd be calling on Bismarck or Minot to come and assist us in those types of situations. Just briefly, some of the training topics that we covered last year. We are required to train at least 96 hours a year to become or to stay state certified as a regional team. The first part of the year, we always go over our policy and our legal procedures for that. We also conduct handgun and rifle qualification. We certify our flashbangs and our chemical munitions. And we also conducted several scenario days last year. We had an 8-hour scenario day, which we utilized the buildings just north of City Hall here before they were tore down. So that was really good training. We learned a lot about ourselves as a team, and we just keep progressing each year over year for that. Outside of that, the regular training hours, we sent a lot of operators to trainings outside of the department, outside of the state. We sent 2 operators to a team leader school. 2 of our newest operators had to attend a SWAT basic. We hosted a hostage rescue course here in Dickinson over the summer, which 4 of our operators attended. Myself and Sergeant Mosier attended a sniper coordination and control course in Denver, Colorado in the fall last year, in which we actually came back with some items to adjust our marksman observer policy. And also our negotiators fall under the SWAT umbrella too. So we had 2 new members attend a basic course with that and 1 in an advanced course. And last year and into this year, the last item on there is just we're attempting to have a secondary tactical channel for our radio communications. And to round it out, what we're going forward, looking into 2018, our team is looking at coordinating with the NTOA again. They're offering a new service to agencies around the nation, and that is they can come in and do a policy and procedure review for our policy book that we have, just to see if there's any suggestions in which we can, something that we can do better, make us more resilient for liability purposes. And they would also come and do a team assessment, basically give us some scenarios, bring some trainers in, and see how we handle what they can throw at us. Another project I want to work on here is getting all of our negotiators cross-trained, in a sense, to become crisis intervention teams within patrol. Just the amount of mental health calls that we receive would serve good credence here if we were to train a couple individual operators, just that extra level of training and how to deal with a crisis situation that wouldn't rise to the level of a SWAT call-out, but they would be utilized by patrol to resolve a mental health crisis situation. Each officer is trained to some extent at the basics for that, but this would allow just a little bit more formalized training for that. We'd also look at getting our team, it's called a wall banger system. It's a little bit quicker of a way to breach a door. We're looking at certifying somebody on that. And also establishing a tactical EMS or a TEMS unit hierarchy within our team. As some of you may know, we actually have a doctor that serves on our SWAT team as a SWAT medic, Dr. Dave Saxon out of Sanford Occupational. He's volunteered his time in service, and I think he's been on the team for about 2 or 3 years now. And since then, I've been approached by several individuals in the community that are either EMTs or paramedics that would also like to assist and volunteer on the team. So we're going to see if Dr. Sachs can spearhead a and establish a TEMS unit within our team. And then the last item on there is Sergeant Clauser. When he returned from the FBI Academy, he brought some new ideas and some new strategies to improve our physical fitness test that we have on our team. Each year we're required, in addition to shooting our rifle and pistol qualifications, we also have to pass a physical fitness test, just simply because it is a very physically demanding assignment. And we identified that there's a potential for some of our stages in our physical fitness course that may have a propensity for injury or whatnot. So like the sit and reach, just kind of hard on the lower back, but Sergeant Clauser was able to bring back some newer ideas that will be able to hopefully reduce that potential for WSI claim, which I know will make Chief Seabuck awfully happy. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions, commissioners, for Sergeant Hannell?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Hannell. Next up, we have Sergeant Clauser.
Okay, I'll try to keep your guys' attention up there. Commissioners, Mr. President, thank you this evening for having me, letting me talk to you guys. But I'm Sergeant Clauser with the Criminal Investigative Division up at the Dickinson Police Department. Give you guys just a slight, backdrop on how that works within the Dickinson Police Department. The Investigative Division is a support division within the agency that consists of right now 4 full-time detectives and then 1 supervisory detective, being myself. And of those 4, they on any given day are running between 20 and 30 active cases. And myself try to carry between a 5 and 10 number caseload. And of that, how they work, when our patrol divisions are fully staffed, we have 7 officers per shift. And our division is there to service and help and support those 28 officers, along with the other needs that the agency has when special occasions arise and such. So one of the big things we often get with our calling tree and such is everybody who calls in and they have a report that they'd like to make or they want to make with us, they would like a detective to handle that. They want to speak to a detective. One of the things that unfortunately we can't afford, so oftentimes they're referred to a patrol officer in those situations, and then we work the appropriate channels from there. But as you can see there, in 2017, the division handled 693 cases, which is up from 2016 and 15. So a couple things that tells us. Patrol was clearly busier. Of those 693 cases that we either took initially or helped with them, a majority of those are felonious. There is a small portion of them that are high priority misdemeanors, but a majority of those are felonious cases. Your sexual assaults, physical assaults, aggravated assaults, shootings, things like that we have. That's going to be this group of case numbers that this group of men handle. And so another one here up in front of you is going to be 2017. We had 55 call-outs, which easy math on that, about once per week we're getting called out. And that's going to be those situations at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning that those officers have that are responding to, that is going to entail a lot of extra attention or detail. Again, whether it be sexual assaults, major assaults, a plethora of things that go in there, major property crimes, burglaries and stuff. But these will be the guys that that come out and respond to that. And so on average, each investigator is called out about 10 to 15 times per year. But that's the highest call-out number that we've ever had, tracking-wise. So that's just kind of, I think, a big one to notate there. They usually are very time-consuming and soak up a lot of the detectives' workload once they have been initiated on a call-out for follow-ups, follow-through, things as such. Apologize, there's a slight typo there on the bottom on the call-outs, but just ignore that. This number I thought would be relevant for you guys to see. It's an interesting trend. Nothing that's really should be awe-striking, but I think that it's interesting to see. If I was able to show you 2015 digital downloads, that would have been about a 45 number. But digital downloads, that's going to entail the electronic devices and laptop computers and things that we are taking in our cases for evidentiary value as part of investigations, pulling that information off of there and then sorting through it. It's something that is continuing to be an upward trend. It's extremely labor intensive to sort through all that information. Cell phones are one thing, just storage capacity, right? But, you know, we get into laptops, which are also in there, and that is, that's a whole nother beast. And laptops are usually days and days, weeks to get through and filter that information. I think it's a prop to the police department and the administration, and for you guys to know that we do have the abilities within our division to conduct any sort of digital download that anybody else in the state of North Dakota and the close region can do. There are a few things that if we get into some, I don't want to overstep my knowledge here because my techie guy's not here, but the encryption and the difficult things that we may encounter, we would ship out further, few and far between. As a large and a whole, we're able to handle nearly everything that the city of Dickinson needs done for them appropriately. So I think that's like I said, just hats off to the department for being prepared in that sense. And I think it's going to continue to grow. I see this growing just the same in the next few years. An example out of this, you guys understand, like when we get into these cases at the high school or these harassment cases, where images have been sent from you know, person to person, and then you get into these devices, and then you find that one person sent it to 1, another person sent it to 5 sent it to 15, trying to track those devices and then bring everything back into the corral so that we can get some containment on things like that. It's something, again, that can really soak up a lot of time real quick, like for this group of guys, and that's what those numbers represent. I've stated some of the things already, but last year in an attempt to help us with some of the workload increase and stuff that we had, our SRO position, school resource officer position, was used as a collateral duty at times to supplement the manpower. We tried to emphasize minor cases, juvenile cases, social service cases, things that would be relevant to that person's day-to-day work activity, which was a relief for us and did help out. For about 4 months last year, we ran short. A large part of that was because of my absence, and then the other combined time is because of other trainings and things as such. So, you know, I just think that it's a testament to those guys that are there, you know, how they're handling business on a day-to-day and doing a good job. A number that is often asked of us, for whatever reason, you can understand why, but our sex offenders, how many sex offenders do we have in the city of Dickinson? Brought up a lot. We're currently at 65. That fluctuates on any given day, 5 to 10. We've been up near 80 at times, and then, you know, back down into the low 60s. Right now we're at 65, and those are going to be high risk, medium risk, and low risk sex offenders here in the city of Dickinson. Some trends that might be relevant for you guys in your you know, your outings when people are talking to you, things maybe you're hearing. The property crimes, since the downturn of the oil field, or violent crimes, have seen a little bit of a decrease, but the property crimes have continued to go up. And the difficult things about these, from the agency standpoint, these are crimes of opportunity often, and it's very much about trying to get our community educated with, you know, using the appropriate locks, deadbolting doors, locking their cars, taking their valuables out of the back of their pickup, you know, things like that. So these guys looking for those crimes of opportunity, they're out there that are really difficult from a patrol standpoint, a police standpoint, to get your hands on or to come across. Some other numbers there that you might be interested in. Last year we had 7 polygraphs that were completed throughout the entire year. These are going to be criminal polygraphs and pre-employment polygraphs. All of our new officers that are hired with us that go through and successfully complete the background have to go through a polygraph examination. And there were 92 agency assists, which a majority of these are going to be with our Stark County Social Services. They're seeing a huge increase in child abuse and sexual abuse cases. We give them a hand in those in Dickinson, of course. And then the FBI, ATF, Marshals, and some other local state agencies throughout the state are in there that I won't mention at this time. And then 1,380 hours total combined training for this group of guys, which I'm a large part of that, as you guys have heard me up here just there in the last few weeks when I was off at Quantico. But even if you remove those hours, we're still at that 900 and some odd hours. The Dickinson Police Department invests in this group of guys to give them the appropriate training that they need. These statements are very general for a reason. I thought maybe it would be good to just give you an idea of some of the major ones we worked this year. I left victims' name out and going to speak real generally just to protect our victims and things for these cases. But we had a couple major infant cases this year that were officially titled non-accidental head injury cases. You maybe heard them commonly referred to years ago, shaking baby and things, skull fractures and stuff on a child that that we have had to handle. And those are very intensive in the sense that we're talking hundreds, thousands of pages of medical documents that were labor intensive for our guys. We had a motor vehicle striking a pedestrian causing death out here on the bypass earlier on in the year last year that was in the media covered. Sexual abuse cases are definitely not foreign to us, and I say very humbly that we do have a lot of them that come through. But a couple highlights here that I think are worth notating, some success stories from our guys. We had one middle of the year last year. It was information that was found at a property in Dickinson by a resident that had child pornography on it. Our guy was able to take that information, get through it all, identify the person that was the child that was on that piece of evidence, work the case, find that child who had since moved out of state, find the appropriate agency, successfully help in completing the investigation on that jurisdiction, and led to a successful investigation. And the perpetrator in that case eventually committed suicide in it, but we were able to locate that child and another child, get them removed from the house, and save what I'll just say is 2 kids from being victims of manufacturing child pornography. So that was a big one for us. And then we had another one there, the sexual abuse of a child. We just had a 30-some-year-old man having sexual intercourse with a 14-year-old that we have worked towards the tail end of last year. That was a big success for us. We had some problems with initially, and were able to come through with some success by the end of the follow-up and such. And as you guys know, last fall, we did conduct a rather large-scale human trafficking operation here in Dickinson with the FBI, BCI, the county, and some other entities, a full-fledged operation. We had multiple people in our command center at the police department working online advertisements, and we're able to successfully make an arrest on an individual that was coming and seeking out a minor, underage person for sexual intercourse. So a very good one for us on that end to work with a bunch of these reputable agencies. And so that's what I have for you from my end. If you have any questions, I certainly would entertain anything that you have.
Any questions for Sergeant Plauser? Great job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, we have a 6:30. Mr. Kubis, can you get through yours? 4 minutes? Close to it? All right.
President Decker and Commissioners, in your packet is a contract amendment, task order amendment for the 2018 Mill and Overlay project with KLJ. 2 meetings ago, we had signed an initial task order with them to scope out the project, to scope out the limits of the project. And this is the addendum to that task order since we've defined the project limits and the scope, this will provide for the design and construction engineering of that 2018 Mill and Overlay project. And the project area will essentially be a northern continuation of the 2017 Mill and Overlay project, which was just north of City Hall here for a few blocks in between Highway 22 and 4th Avenue East. The map you can see here is a continuation of that from 6th Street up to 9th Street, still in between Highway 22 and 4th Avenue East. So the old hospital is kind of right in the middle of this year's project. The project is estimated at $1.3 million construction costs now, which equates to roughly 15% engineering costs. And the budget for the project will be the transfer from the 50% of the 1% sales tax. Staff has negotiated the scope and fee with the consultant and would recommend approval. With that, I would stand open for any questions you would have.
Any questions for Mr. Kubis on this project? I noted on the one map you included for us that there's a future water line. There's orange and yellow indications that we have.
There is, yeah. In the map that you see here, that street or streets were left out of the Mill and Overlay project because we have a pending application with the State Water Commission for the installation of a water main, starts at what I call the Water Tower Hill Water Tower. And then it goes down 7th Street, and then it jogs on 2nd Avenue and continues on 6th Street. So we don't want to mill and overlay those streets with the anticipation that we'll have a water line being installed. So there will be a few blocks that will be left out, but other than that, the entire neighborhood, so to speak, will be mill and overlaid.
And the water project's been approved?
It has not.
Okay.
No, it was a project identified in our water utility master plan. We have an application with the State Water Commission, but we haven't received word back if that will be approved or not.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Kubus?
So the total engineering cost is estimated at $211,000?
Well, this is the amendment is $211,905. The initial cost was $8,100, so about $219,220.
The total project, you said it was 1.5?
The construction cost, total project cost would be 1.5. Total construction cost would be $1.3 million estimate right now.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Kubus? If not, I would look the task order number.
It's task order number S12, and this would be amendment number 1 to task order S12.
There are no questions or comments for Mr. Kubus. I would look for a motion on this task order. Mr. Frederick?
I'd make a motion to approve KLJ Task Order S12 with Amendment 1 for the 2018 Mill and Overlay Project.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
in a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Kubus? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Task order is approved.
Thank you.
We have a 6:30 on our timetable agenda. That'll be presented by Assessor Hirschfeld.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. We have an abatement this evening, filed by Mr. Steve Gamola. He's president of Western Properties LLC. The property is filed for the 2017 valuation year on 346 First Street Southwest. Property ID number 0330-1100-1200. The assessed value for 2017 for this property was $95,200, and the applicant is seeking a value of $55,300. The applicant did waive his right to appear tonight. He's located from western Montana, so he won't be joining us this evening. Just off the top there, this property here was purchased in 2011 for $88,500. The assessed value for that property never was higher than the purchase price until the neighborhood was revalued in 2016, at which time a value of $94,400 was placed on the property. I do want to point out that my appraiser did not gain access to that property, and so he estimated the interior condition and materials from the street based upon what the exterior looked like. Quite common practice, but it often can lead to an error just due to not having had the opportunity to view the interior. And such was the case as following the filing of the application. He was granted access and did notice some things that were not accurate on the property record card that he corrected, which would have led to a value of, I believe it was $81,800. The applicant did supply a CMA, a comparable market analysis, completed by Mr. Josh Dorman. He's a realtor for the real estate company. I do want to point out that those sales used in that CMA were from 2017, and so they all were subsequent to the marketing period from which the 2017 value would have been set. So I didn't give a whole lot of weight to that which was provided just due to the change in time period. And
Mr. Hirschfeld.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick question. Why do we constantly see that? I mean, it seems that's, you know, when we're getting comparable pricing, they're always listed in the year that they're being assessed. Is it not common practice to go back to the 2016 pricing since you're being assessed for that market? Because we see this a lot, so I'm just curious.
We certainly do, and we try and educate people as it comes up, but it's a difficult concept, I guess, to understand that the valuation period lags a year behind, and then the taxes are after that, so you're almost 2 years from the date that these are filed.
Right.
And everybody, I mean, it's commonplace that when you're talking about a value, the market value, you're thinking of today. And, you know, whether that subject was broached with Mr. Dorman or not, that, oh, by the way, you know, this is the 17 valuation, so we need to be thinking of 16 comparables. You know, I can't, you know, just vouch for what the process was, but, you know, certainly there's that disconnect because everybody's always looking at, you know, what's it worth today? Well, it wouldn't sell for this today. Well, it may or may not, but the marketing period that we're looking at lags, you know, a year for residential.
So had Mr. Dorman submitted list pricing or properties that were sold in 2016 that were comparable, that would have been something we could have looked at a little more thoroughly?
Would have certainly looked at it a little closer, and, you know, in regards to the upcoming valuation, we can certainly use this in valuing this property for this upcoming 2018 valuation. It's just not relevant to the period that we're talking about this evening.
Thank you.
Are we saying that 2016 was higher than 2017 sales? I mean, I mean, I understand your argument, but most current sales would tell me that this is what it's worth.
As far as currently, I guess I'm not following your question, Mr. Friedrich.
Well, I'm just saying is, if you wanted him to use 2016 sales, are we saying that the sales would have been higher in 2016 than they are in 2017?
They'd have been more representative of the marketing period that we looked at. Because the 17 valuation would have been set in May of 17. And the sales that we'd utilize for that would have come from the 2016 marketing period.
Was there a 10% credit applied to 2017?
A deduction?
Deduction
In this neighborhood, I believe we did give a decrease to this neighborhood.
in 2017?
In
And then there's
2017.
another 10% coming up 2018?
And it's looking like there'll be another 10% decrease to that neighborhood this year. We haven't completely compiled the numbers, but just, you know, off the cuff, that's what we're looking at again.
Yeah. So 20% would actually, when you use 2018 coming in, the 2017 assessed value was 92, 20% is another $20,000, takes it on to 75. And they're asking for it to be assessed at
55,300.
55,300.
And then,
Just under 50%
And
drop.
wanted to point out the year prior to the increase when it was revalued, the assessed value on that was 66,000. So assuming that the property sold for market value, as most of them did, I mean, we never did reach market value on this until the revaluation. It went through 2 Board of Equalization cycles without the
So it
property
was-
owner coming before us.
So in 2011, it was excessive 41.7, and it sold for 88.
Correct.
How come they don't come in before that and tell us to bump these up?
I have yet to get that question answered.
All right.
I think it's probably self-explanatory, but, you know, I think too, part of the reason why, you know, oftentimes we're not granted access, and if the property was valued at 66,000 and you knew you paid 88 for it, you know, 4 years prior, and the market had increased a little bit in that time period, maybe, you know, we've gone over the top and come back a little bit, certainly. But at that point, you know, I'm not sure what the property owner's thinking, but, you know, if we keep the appraiser for the assessing department out of the house and they can't increase the value, well, you know, with the hailstorms, with the tornado that went through that area, you've possibly updated siding, replaced windows, and a new roof. Well, you made the house look pretty good. So if we're assuming the interior's in the same condition, all of a sudden that interior could be in above average condition, which doesn't necessarily represent the property well. And so we always ask, you know, give us access to the interior just to verify the condition of the house. And in this case, you know, it would have prevented the value from going to 95. It most likely would have ended up down around 81.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld?
When you request entry into their homes, I mean, do you just submit a letter and they have to get back to you? I'm not familiar with that process.
My appraiser, Jeremy Farrar, he goes to the neighborhood. He'll knock on a door. You know, if nobody's home, we've got a little door hanger that says why we're there in the neighborhood, what we're doing there, you know, kind of the process, has our phone number, please give us a call. And he'll go back to the house and leave that door hanger 3 times. And at that point, then he'll estimate it from the street. And then in this case here, you know, the value went out at $95,000. Every property owner gets a notice of value every year. So, you know, if you get that in March, quite easily in our May hearing that we're going to have, you come and say, well, it's not worth $95,000. Mr. Farrar goes back to the house, notices, all right, you know, we did overestimate this, you know, just based off the assumption, and he can make the correction, you know, immediately, you know, before the value's even accepted. In this case, you know, we went through 2 cycles before this property owners decided to abate that value.
You know, one of the things that people don't consider when they look at the entire thing is when you talk about the true and full value of the property is the land and the improvements, improvement being the home. You know, in this case, the improvement's $73,900, which you basically say that's the value of the home. The land at 21.3, a lot in town now, if you had to go and put in sewer, water, curb, gutter, and so on, you're looking at what, 50, 60,000?
Yeah.
And we're at 21.3 for land. I don't know if I can read any more into that or not, but you know, I kind of look at the value of the homes and not including the land because it is broke out separate from the true and full value. So a lot of people look at this and say, boy, that home at $95,200 isn't worth it. But it's not that. It's $73,000, and that home is worth it.
It certainly could be, and you know, at 2011, it was certainly worth $88,500 to this gentleman here.
Okay, any further questions, comments for Mr. Hirschfeld? Now, we have 3 options on the second page. You have option 1 to move to deny, option 2 to accept value at 55.3, or you can go to option 3 and you change the value on the parcel to a value determined. I would look for a motion from the commission.
I move to deny the request for a change in value.
I have a motion to deny
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? Now we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The abatement is denied.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you.
Okay, moving along, we're in Public Works. Mr. Zuroff, we have a refuse water request for proposal.
President Decker, Commission, thank you. That should be reuse water. I just noticed, not refuse water.
Okay.
Thank you and good evening. As you're aware, the Dakota Prairie Refinery, which is now Endeavor Refinery, is using our reuse water. We have a long-term contract with them. Because the city of Dickinson upsized that line to that area, we've been able to sell significant amounts of reuse water the last couple of years. This year, we had multiple parties interested in that reuse water. So the decision was made to do a request for proposal for that water. And the date for submittal was last Friday. We got 2 submissions for the proposal. Staff reviewed the two interested parties, and after reviewing the two parties, the staff recommends selling reuse water to North Dakota Energy Services, subject to successful contract negotiations. I'll sure be able to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, any comments or questions for Ms. Zuroff?
The other request didn't qualify?
It did qualify during the on our RFP. The selection criteria, if you did review it, had, the cost was 30%, experience, expertise was 30%, understanding approach was 30%, and longevity or future plans and uses was 10%. The other vendor didn't meet 2 or 3 of those categories. So, scoring them, that's why we determined the Indy Energy Services.
And the custody, the transfer point is the same one out?
Yep, just north of Endeavor Refinery, the same custody point. And I guess one thing I don't want to explain too much on these, they are private companies. There was some confidentiality in some of the submittals. So, if there's more in-depth questions.
I was going to say, because we don't have, well, at least I don't have.
Right.
Any of the proposals in front of us.
Right.
But this is public money and so on. There really is no confidentiality if we need to see the numbers. Would that be correct?
Mr. President, members of the commission, Commissioner Steiner, the confidential information, there's only part of one of the proposals that contains confidential information. The money, if you would like Mr. Zuroff to speak to the prices, he sure could do that. The assertion with regards to confidentiality related to more to the longevity component of what are your future business plans in the area, and both of them had asserted that this area and would qualify as confidential information. I reviewed and would agree that under 4404 18.4 it could constitute confidential commercial information. So if you had questions about that component, that would be. And you could certainly receive it. You could, you could certainly go into executive session to hear the confidential information on just that portion. If you're interested in the pricing component, the cost, and the submissions with regards to the cost, which probably is a primary concern, that is public information. And if you have any questions for Mr. Zuroff,
and I can sure give you that. The one thing that we wanted, though, was that to have the selection not just on cost.
I don't need the numbers. When you mention confidentiality, I want to make sure that we were above board.
Right.
And if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
She's right beside me kicking me, so I have.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions for Mr. Zuroff?
Can you give us an idea of the revenue this will generate?
Well, one of the things, last year, I can't remember, we sold over 200 million gallons. The first 100 million, I think, was a little over $7. So it added up to a substantial. One of the things in this RFP, we did want some sort of commitment. If they could give us an astronomical dollar amount per 1,000 gallons, but if there's no commitment, we're sitting there waiting for some revenue stream. They did give a commitment of 15 million gallons, which is pretty small. Usually that's about, on wells, maybe one, maybe two wells to frack, but they did give a commitment of $15 million and a 25%
15 million gallons, right?
15 million gallons.
Yeah, not $15 million.
No, 15 million gallons with a 25% down payment of $28,125. If this goes the way I think it will, because they only finished about half the wells they had proposed to finish last year, that I would guess that we would have at least the same amount of revenue as last year, being at least a couple 100 million gallons of water used.
All right.
May I ask a question? Mr. Sir, could you comment on the, Mr. Kessel-Disling said, what about the non-exclusive nature of the agreement, and could you comment on that?
Right. On both of these, and also with the previous contracts, they haven't been non-exclusive. In other words, if they're not using water, their water's not just sitting there for them. If we enter into contract, I guess the way I look at it is they will be, the first right water user for the excess water. But if they're not using water, we can still sell additional reuse water, either per fee schedule or possibly another contract.
Okay.
That was my next question. Why wouldn't we sell to both?
I guess one of the things is limited GPM capacity in that pipeline. One of the things that they like to see is when they're pulling water hard, they want to see all the water they can get, and we're limited to that 2100 GPM.
Okay.
So, if they need that 2100 GPM, that's kind of what the contract is. They get that when they want it, but we could still sell water when they're not pulling the full amount of water.
Okay.
It's important to note as well that we have an existing long-term contract with Endeavor, and that is our first priority.
Right.
And then this is secondary to that contract.
Has Endeavor's water use stayed pretty?
It's gone up the last year a little bit.
Okay.
But I think it's about 140, 150 gallons a minute.
Okay.
So compare that to 2100 GPM, it's, fairly small in the capacity of our system.
Okay, so what Mr. Zuroff is looking for then is, we don't have
It's
the
right at the-
actual RFP in front of us, so, we have the blank,
Okay.
but you're looking for approval for,
Yes, and Attorney Murtha does have the language here, the proposed motion to move to sell the reuse water to North Dakota
think
Energy
that's in
Services.
it's in the memo here.
Yep. And we will still be bringing back the contract for approval.
And we don't have the approved motion in the memo either.
Should be the last.
The last sentence in the memo.
What I have here on my memo, unless everyone else has something different, I just have reuse water. I have nothing else. I'll pull this up here so that.
There's a motion on the one online, or on my laptop here.
Okay, yeah, it's on here. When I printed it out earlier today, it was not on there, so. But there is, under item 7, there is a motion there to consider for the commission to consider, so. And with the proposed motion, says name of vendor. Do we have a name of vendor?
North Dakota Energy Services.
Okay. So I would look for some direction from the commission.
Mr. President,
Mr. Frederick,
I'd make a motion, we move to sell reuse water to Dakota
Energy Services.
Energy Services in accordance to Dickinson City Code 2.28.050C, in the terms of the RFP issued January 22nd, 2018, subject to successful contract negotiations.
we have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further discussion, questions? We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
RFP is approved. Move on to planning. Mr. Hadley?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, tonight I have a one-lot final plat, Howe Edition, and along Palm Beach Road in the ETZ. It's 3.5 acres in size approximately. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing. There was no input from the public, and the Planning Commission and staff would recommend approval of it. I believe the resolution number is 04-2018.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hadley on this final plat?
Mr. President, I move the City Commission approve resolution number 04-2018 as presented. The proposed house subdivision is compliant with the City of Dickinson City Code and Comprehensive Plan, and as being in the best interest of the general public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion to approve 04-2018.
Second.
The second. Any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Resolution 04-2018 is approved. And Building and Codes, we have a report.
Good evening, Commissioners, President Decker, Commissioners. City of Dickinson Building Permit Report, month ending December 2017. As you can see to the chart, we had a pretty good year. Total permits issued were 66. That's an increase of 128% compared to last year at 29. And of that, we had 57 housing units, where the previous year was 20. With the increase in building activity, the values go up. We base our values off of factors set by the ICC codes based on square footage for values. Alterations and additions did go down, and with that, we had a decrease in value of 12%. Actually, a decrease in building permits were 12% and a decrease of 21% in the valuations. Miscellaneous permits across the board with more activity, they go up also. Plumbing permits, mechanical, concrete, stormwater permits. We were at 577 compared to the previous year at 463, increase of 25%. Fees remitted to the city, increase. We were right at, last year at about it was 327,417. This year, 519,972, increase of 59%. Code compliance, also, our numbers increased. We did take on some summertime help, which even with the lack of rainfall last year, the weeds seemed to take off, which previous year was 749. We were at 1,508 for just tall grass and weeds. Previous year total 1137 for code compliance. 2017 was at 1840.
Mr. Schwint, if I might ask you a question right here.
Okay.
What seems to be the biggest violations here on, especially with the high grass and weeds? I mean, is it a certain type of property? Is it abandoned property? Is it? Do we have rental units that are not being taken care of?
That would be the majority, and out-of-state vacant lots. Owners that are out of state.
Okay. So as a whole, the regular residents are pretty good. It's just.
Yes, it would be rental property and out-of-state owners of the property.
Thank you.
Budget for the buildings and codes was at the 427. Our actual was at 397. We ended up on the books at just below 7% for our overall budget. Next item on there was I was asked to participate in helping out the Library Foundation in taking down the Ark. I got.
Schwint, before you go on, if commissioners, do you have any questions on his year-end report? Anything? Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, continue.
Okay. As you all well know, the ARC will be coming down. I did receive some proposals from local contractors, and the foundation has accepted a proposal from BG to take the ARC building down.
Okay.
That'd be the end of my report.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Schwint? All right, well, thank you, Mr. Schwint. We don't get to hear from you very often, but it was good news this year, it seemed like.
Right.
Some pretty good news. So.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to public issues of city concern not on the agenda. If you have a issue of city concern that's not on our agenda, please come forward, state your name for the city commission, and we will hear your concern. Seeing that there is no one from the public with any concerns, I would close that agenda item. And commissioners, do we have any items that you would like to discuss before we adjourn? Seeing the commission has no items they wish to discuss, I would look for the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.